So on that example, just to again explain why, how the system then works or why a digital standard can be very helpful, is the fact that if everyone uses that digital standard, that means that basically you're using a set of data, a set of information on a gold bar, which includes when was that gold bar born, who created it, what's the weight, where did the gold come from, which vaults has the bar been at. That kind of information, obviously, if you don't have a data standard that kind of digitally tracks it and records it, all that information is lost. And then you're back in that state of, if someone asks, well, where did that bar come from? Or, where was that bar before? Was it in Russia? Or was it in the UK? Those are questions that you, who want to keep or hold that gold bar, wants to know about. Getting that information, if it's all paper-based, is very difficult, because with each movement, with each transaction, the information is truncated, it's changed, it can be erroneously entered. If we look at some of the online systems, in the warehousing systems that exist today, very often what you'll see is a 1 kilogram bar, maybe cast, and if you're lucky, you'll get the brand. That's not necessarily, even there. So it's very rudimentary information that you get when you log into some of those logistics. You'll get the bar number is very important. But ultimately, what you don't see is it minted or cast is not necessarily always there. Who created it? Because very often what you'll have is, let's say a bar is created by aXedras, but it's branded with the UBS brand, so you don't really know where did that bar come from. One of the missing information pieces, which is very important, is the fact that aXedras may create a bar, but it may not know when that bar is terminated. So now you have a bar that is out there with a number and an identity. People know, oh, there was this bar, but it may be refabricated or melted by someone else. So it's much easier for people to come into the market with forgeries. If you have, like you said, that system of records, which provides accounting, a ledger of checks and balances, now you have a situation where you will see that that bar was terminated. So if a new bar comes in, or if a bar is then registered on the system, it will say, hey, wait a minute, this is weird, that bar was terminated, it should only exist once. Or if a bar is already in the system, it's been registered, and another one comes along, now you have duplicates. And so that's where the technology of blockchain can be really, really powerful, in that those records are immutable. If you have the traffic, now you have a data standard for an industry, and I think that principle could be used across many industries.
Yeah, in many industries. And the reason why I like this specific use case so much is that what you just described is a lens itself at also providing, you can also provide explanations of other aspects of blockchain technology. So what you just said is super important, but there is even more than that, because if you think about it, for the logistic company, what matters to them is that they have the right address, okay? Once they have delivered that gold bar, they don't care about it anymore. So for them, what is important is that there is an industry-wide, level record, system of record, but they're only interested in a snapshot in time, which is today. Where do I need to go today to deliver that bar? But the ledger preserves all the history of all those things that have ever happened. So when the volume was created, when it was terminated, where it went that day. And once you have that back history as well, which is what we call backchain, you can have other benefits. You can apply it to other use cases. One that comes to mind, which is obvious, is that now, finally, you have a way to back up your ESG claims. Now, ESG is a huge topic these days. So all the environmental and governance aspect. So people are kind of whitewashing a lot of it, but even the good actors that are doing it in good faith, and they're claiming that, for example, you should buy my product because we are offsetting our carbon footprint, then they're struggling with providing the data that can actually back up those claims. Because exactly outside of the boundary of the organization, they can't really prove that what their suppliers are telling them is actually true.
At least not efficiently. You know,
so
for example, in the case of gold and in many other cases, the documentation and the auditing and everything is very intense. But in the end, then producing that proof where it comes from is very cumbersome.
Yes.
And ESG, I think, is a great example. I think ESG is one of those things which comes with great intentions. You know, has a purpose of, I guess, you know, building or together, you know, creating rules to build a better world and do that in different dimensions. ESG is also a bureaucratic monster, you know, because basically you're now trying to, in a very technocratic way, create rules of exclusion or selection or ratings and risks and so on. And you're right that around that, a whole industry, especially in the financial services industry, a whole industry has been created. And I think the more, you know, it is being marketed, the larger. It's actually had quite a bit of a setback. But there's a lot of greenwashing. There's a lot of claims, like you say, where you know, product funds claim certain things which, in my view, cannot be proven, and in many cases are just marketing.
Yeah.
And that creates a bad stigma for that. And so what you're saying is, with proper blockchain usage, you could actually create a situation where we don't drown in bureaucracy. We have efficient ways of proving, and we're also creating much more transparency. And we talk about that a lot in terms of calling, instead of ESG or something, we really use the term product integrity. You know, which product integrity basically meaning that what you claim, what you're selling, what your marketing brochure says, should in fact be what's in that product. And proving that is difficult or is cumbersome unless you have it digitized to some degree. And digitized in a way where you know it's not, the data and the information has not been tinkered with. And that's one big problem with ESG today, is that a lot of the information, let's say, for example, on the social or governance element, comes from, you know, annual financial statements and things like that. So it's like, you know, how trustworthy is that? It's
yeah, exactly.
So that's a huge issue there. Yeah.
Yeah, which creates a big problem, because not only you may end up trusting people that don't deserve the trust, but also the good players are struggling in the current like system, because again, I've learned this from aXedras, because there was in this case was a miner from I think it was from South America, and it's not a huge mining operation, but they were doing everything as well as they could, so they were really like environmental conscious. But the problem is that they didn't have an industry-wide accepted way of proving that actually they were really good. So they were competing with other people that maybe were not that good, but they could make up stuff because there isn't yet an industry-wide accepted way of proving what you're claiming. So
one of the problems of ESG or that kind of thinking is also that so this mine that you, for example, you explain is that, you know, they're doing everything they can to make sure that people are not hurt by you know, things like mercury. They use mercury properly and so on. And however, it's difficult from one day to the next to have a perfect world. So what happens is that, you know, the danger exists that those that are not yet in the perfect state of doing the business are going to be excluded. And in the case of ASM's, artisanal mines, the danger then becomes that, you know, if you don't meet those standards that are now set, you may be on the way to get there and you're trying to make a living, but you haven't met those standards. If you're then excluded from reaching, for example, from being able to send your gold to a Swiss refiner, now you're in a situation where you're going to have to sell your gold to the Chinese refiner. And the Chinese refiner may actually pay you a lot less than what the Swiss refiner would pay you. So to some degree, the pressure also by NGOs to kind of say, oh, you are buying gold from mines that are not properly regulated and so on, again, good intentions, but we also have to watch out that we then don't hurt people that actually are trying to make a living and are trying to move in the right direction, like the example you stated. And there again, I think a good standard digitalized can create new opportunities for those kinds of mines, because they can show progress, for example, more easily. Otherwise, how are they going to prove that they're trying to do the right thing? It's going to be very cumbersome and too expensive for the refiners who buy the gold to actually do all that work. So what are the refiners going to do? They're either going to invest and oversee certain ASMs, because that's to help, and a lot of them do that. But with a large part of their business, they're just going to say, well, I guess I can't buy gold from Dubai or from Peru or whatever, and we're just going to buy from the big players because they are properly regulated. So yeah, there's ESG has a lot of, I don't want to go off on that tangent too much, but I think there's again, like you said before, there's pros and cons of ESG, which yeah, I'm not a great fan of ESG. The way it's being used or pushed today, I think there's a lot to say for responsibility and for doing business properly, but I'm not sure the approach with you know, that somewhat technocratic approach with taxonomies and so on is the right way. I have reservations, let's say that much. Yeah.
Yeah, but at least now you potentially have a technology that will allow people to create
might allow a better, yeah,
industry-wide system.